questions and having that conversation. So give me a bit, and within the next week or so, I'll have an answer for you on that, and we'll be happy to share that.
Thank you.
Quite a group here in person.
Yeah, it's kind of a small.
We don't have anything on. Okay.
Yeah, we've got it. They can hear us, Steve, and they're online.
They can see our presentation, but we can't see anything, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, so I have to come down there and look at it. Or this is just.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I have no idea why. I text Stacy, but she's at a conference, so we'll see if we get anything back.
That's okay.
She is. I haven't ran this, and this computer is unfamiliar to me, and it
She
should
might
be.
be asking for a raise, Deanna.
Yeah. Well, so that everybody knows, we have a technical team working to update all of this because we've been having issues, but it's not complete yet. So.
That's all right.
But anyway, as long as everybody online can see and we have it here in paper, we'll be all right.
Yeah, you were at the last Thule meeting. Was there anything else? We talked about the site study. Was there anything else we should share with the group?
No, I mean, the Thule has a list of the outstanding issues that the facilitator is helping everybody work through. The subsidence study area is one of the number one things, but we still have not completed the mitigation plan. The coordination agreement is not yet complete, so there are a few outstanding things in the Thule to work through. Everybody seems to be working together pretty well, so hopefully we can get to these last outstanding issues. I think the subsidence study area is going to be one of the key factors. I had a discussion with Eric Lemus yesterday. Him and I are both on the same page that the subsidence study has to include actual data from both the Delano Early Mart side as well as Tri-County and Pixley side. So without inputting actual data into that study, Pixley and Tri-County will not accept the study. So that's where we're in.
So that's
in
encouraging.
agreement on that.
Yeah, because we, obviously I represent a landowner who's on both sides.
Yes.
And we know full well what's going on in Delano because he's there pumping in Delano. And we know the depth of our wells in Delano.
Yeah.
And they're not shallow.
Yeah, they're not shallow.
Right?
Bottom
we're not
line.
going to put up with something where they're going to say, hey, we're not going to tell you what we're doing.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. So Steve, I think you missed it, but we were talking about the fact that the current scope of work only calls for some groundwater model scenarios, and we think that's a deal breaker. Bottom line, that's a deal breaker for us if you don't include actual data and collection of actual data. So we're going to be pretty adamant about a few things in our response back to the
group. We can't coordinate unless we have clarity on that. We can't, and we sure can't afford to sign a agreement with Delano where they're going to have to indemnify them for any action due to their supposedly subsidence.
Agreed.
Yeah,
so,
agreed. Yeah.
Thank you for looking out for your growers and trying to.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to, put actions in place, it has to be substantiated. So, if it's substantiated, then that is what it is. But we have to make sure that it's correct.
Yeah, I think, speaking for Jay too, I think, we want to be obviously a good neighbor, but we also want to know what the data is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if it truly is causing issues like the wells over on his side, well, then we'll have to deal with that. That's
right.
But we don't know that.
Right. Right.
And so that study it's going to take a bit. It's not going to be completed before the end of the year or anything like that. We're probably looking at, first quarter. So.
There may be additional data gathering even continuing after that. If the preliminary study results might come out, as Deanna said, just to keep things moving. But there may be additional data that needs to be collected in long term as well.
I mean, what's the most recent subsidence reading that you're working from?
They just came out. there was some that just came out, let's see, so it would be in July.
Are they in the?
No, not yet.
Do you have an idea how much more have we subsided up to this period? Do you have that data?
I don't, but people on my team do, yeah.
Tom Harder has it.
Yeah, and David Finney from our team has it, I just didn't ask him that question.
And then the data in our Tri-County is how many data points do we have for subsided?
Well, it's INSAR, so we have all of that.
So we have INSAR, but don't we have a,
Oh, yeah, there are some, yes, Four Creeks does monitor some points in Tri-County as well.
okay.
Yeah. I think they're actually doing that now, or they just finished it, yeah.
No, I'd be really curious to see how things are tracking.
Yeah. Okay, I think we covered the Thule, unless anyone else has a question. The Thule Trust, Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, we have completed our land valuing evaluations for this next year. We had 3 applicants from Tri-County. Unfortunately, we were only able to fund 1 just due to the limited amount of funding that we had available. They have been notified. I'm working with them now to get agreements signed so we can get moving on that. I have not yet heard anything about the USDA funding. We are supposed to hear this month, so I'm anxiously awaiting that notification. And we also are working on our watershed planning, which Deanna was a part of. We are looking to set up our second meeting to finalize some documents and design a plan for moving forward on identifying potential watershed projects.
Hey, Susan, how much more money would you have needed to fund everybody? Now, I understand you only funded 1 out of 3, but I'm assuming that was probably also the case in some of the other GSAs. And how much more money would you have needed? Just ballpark.
For just Tri-County?
No, I was kind of curious. Yeah, just for Tri-County, I was just kind of curious.
Tri-County would have been a little over $800,000, or
okay,
between 780 and 800, something like that.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot of acreage.
Was that additional to what we already were paying out, the $404,000 for the Tri-County? Or is that total?
That would be additional. The total for Tri-County that we would have needed to fund all 3 applicants was 1.279.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And it would have been a total of 1,103 acres.
How many acres did we actually, what was the application, how many acres what was the application that was?
You have 336.81 acres.
Okay, all right.
In the best that I can tell, it is a high subsidence area. It's difficult for me to be able to identify that without actual having like the GIS map, but I do believe that it was in a high subsidence area.
That's good. That's a good spot to fallow land.
Yeah.
It's not good that we have subsidence. It's just
it depends how you look back.
It's all you guys understand.
I know what you meant.
Oh man.
All right, Susan. Anything else for the group?
Not at this time.
All right, thank you. It's good to know about what we were able to fund and what it would cost to do a more robust program, and obviously hoping that the USDA funding does come through. And just as a reminder to everybody, the USDA funding was specifically directed towards land fallowing and having more funds available.
Right.
$20 million, Susan, is something like that?
25. 25 million.
25 million, okay. Yeah, all right, great, thank you.
Can
You're
I ask a
welcome.
All
quick
right.
question? This is Johnny Gailey.
Sure.
Yeah, what is that fouling program single year, or is that a multi-year program?
So as of right now, it's really a single year because we do not have guaranteed funding to ensure, redoing the program every year. If we do get the USDA money, then it will be a multi-year because we'll be able to guarantee that.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
And just so everybody knows, Tri-County's board, did authorize, I believe, $200,000 for 5 years if we're able to get that USDA money. So the Tri-County's already, agreed to that and approved that. We're hoping that the USDA funding comes through.
200,000 per year.
Per year for 5 years.
Yeah, plus the USDA funding, yeah,
Right.
in addition to. Okay, great, thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
All right, you wanna pull up the
Sure.
allocation?
I'll give it my best shot here. So. Why isn't it popping up? I had this all up before this meeting started. I don't know what's going on now. Am I doing that wrong?
Susan, can you see, are you seeing us on the screen, or are we, or are you seeing the presentation?
Both. I can see both.
I see both.
I don't
The
know.
presentation is not in presentation mode. It's in PowerPoint, but it is, I can see both.
So they are seeing this window then. Yeah, why don't we see it?
Craziest thing ever. It was us earlier. Let's do that. There we go.
Oh, there we go, okay.
Okay.
There we go. Now I'm hoping you're all seeing the full slide.
You're in presenter mode.
You are good.
That's okay.
That works.
Yeah.
It popped up
But
on our
yes,
screen.
we can
We're
see
gonna
it.
just say, hey.
I think we'll take the win.
We're good. Wow, I don't know.
Okay. So,
All right.
Oh, man.
I wanted to take a little bit, Deanna and I talked about this, and we wanted to take a little bit of time today to talk about the allocation program, the allocation policy, and how it ties in with the management plan. So just to make sure that everybody is clear and to avoid confusion for all of, for our stakeholders, the management plans are the documents that we are preparing if and only if there are impacts. So, for example, if there are impacts due to subsidence, there is a series of events, and at a portion of if a certain amount of subsidence happens, then actions get triggered. It's similar to what you've seen from Pixley and Lower Tule. The management plan will exist for all three SMCs. There will be one for water levels, water quality, and subsidence. And they all have different triggers depending on what is happening. So it's based on MTs for water quality, based on MTs for water levels, and MTs for subsidence. And since they have triggers and actions taking place, I wanted to make sure that we were clear on what the allocation policy is versus what the management plans are and what happens, how the two documents are how we're planning on working together and where they overlap, and what has to happen for one to take supremacy over the other. So the short answer to all of that is the allocation policy will be in effect until there are impacts. Only the areas that have impacts will be then subject to the management plan. The rest of the GSA will continue to operate under the allocation policy. That's the simple way of saying it, right? I've got a few slides that I'm just going to walk you through, and then we'll jump into the actual allocation policy itself. So, as we already said, there will be allocations assigned to each aquifer for Tri-County, and in our case, you will have allocations for the upper aquifer or an allocation for the lower aquifer, and we're going to get into those actual values. I just want to make sure everybody understands, what we are talking about in general for the allocation policy, and then we're going to get into specifics in a second. All right. So every piece of land in I almost said South Fork again there, Johnny, because we're thinking about tomorrow's meeting. For Tri-County is going to get a sustainable yield, and then the properties that qualify because they have transitional water are going to get the transitional water. But we're going to divide everything up into these management areas and management zones, which you've already seen all of this before from the stuff that we've presented for Pixley. And these zones are, we're going to continue to use those for both subsidence as well as for water quality, as well as for water levels. And the reason we're going to do that is if we start to change the shape of the zones for each, water levels or water quality, it just makes it that much more confusing for everybody. And we thought it's easier if you all know which zone you're in, and it would apply to all three SMCs. The exact values for those SMCs for each zone, we will tell you, and as we develop the final management plans. So you've got, for the management plans, you've got these management zones. Everybody across the GSA is going to get an allocation of sustainable yield. As I've already said, as impacts occur in each management zone, as water levels drop or subsidence occurs, it will trigger a series of actions. Again, everybody else who is in the subbasin, in the GSA, will continue to operate under the normal allocation policy. And I'm sorry if I know I'm going through this rather repetitively, but I just want to make sure that everybody clearly understands that the triggers in the management plans will only apply to areas where there are impacts. If you're in a zone with no impacts, just keep, the allocation policy will still be in effect, and you will operate under the allocation policy.
So, question: each zone will have an MT for subsidence and an MT for water levels. The MT for groundwater quality would be the same for everybody, though. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yes.
So the only two moving parts will really be water levels and subsidence.
Yeah. The only ones that will be different per zone,
Okay.
per management zone, could be, or maybe we'll start calling them management areas. I don't know, to avoid some of the confusion. But the only ones that would be different per each management zone is going to be, as you already said, subsidence and water levels.
Water levels. Okay.
The water quality MTs will apply across the entire board. So, if you are in a management zone that does not have impacts, you are going to operate under the normal allocation policy, and you continue, even if the people in the zone next to you are under some other limitations, you would continue to operate normally. One of the questions that we are struggling with, and as we're writing the actual management plan, is, let's say, I'm going to pick on the people in this room. Let's say Steve is pumping within his allocation, Deanna's pumping within her allocation, and let's say I'm exceeding my allocation and I'm causing the impact. Does the limitations and the triggers apply to everybody equally in the management zone? And that's what we're trying to make sure that there's appropriate language in there that allows for actions to take place, but is directed maybe towards the people that are exceeding their pumping allocations.
I think that's mainly why Pixley's first trigger is an investigation in the area, a notification
Notifications
to all landowners, and then an investigation. I think that we probably have to do the same step.
Yeah.
To understand what's happening in that area.
So we don't want to, just run out and start hitting everybody with a hammer. We want to make sure it's a little bit more precise than that.
What was the timing? Did you remember, Deanna, was it fixed? Did they give themselves like months to go? What was the timing?
So they've already noticed a swath of area, particularly along the DEID and up along Frank Kern too.
Right.
That they are, I don't remember the language they use, but that they are in a critical zone or whatever. And so they've noticed them, and they've already started registering those wells and meters, and started the investigative process in those zones. So they probably have 12 or 13 zones that they've started that process in now.
So, as I said, we're going to talk about the allocation policy, and we're working through the management plans, but we do want to present the management plan or draft or so at the next meeting as well, and then show you how both of these, continue to show how both of these will work together over time. So I'm going to revisit this issue a little bit as we close. We'll talk through the allocations and then revisit the management plan one more time before we end for today. Okay, so let's talk draft allocation plan. So we actually have a written document put together. We expect to have it out for your review fairly soon here, well before the next meeting. We've got to iron out a few things, and we're going to ask for and that'll give everybody a draft to give us your thoughts and ideas. All right, so first thing I'm going to say this probably 10 times today, register your wells.
Yeah, we have to get that done.
We have to get that done. We are talking about how, to put some incentives into the allocation program to make sure that happens, because without registering those wells, the allocation program, doesn't work, and a whole bunch of other things don't work. So we want to use the allocation program, the revisions to it, as a incentive to register your wells.
And Tri-County wants it done by December, right?
We would love to have it done by December.
Okay.
I can tell you I do not have good response yet. So, we adopted the policy. The policy is adopted, but we didn't adopt any particular enforcement, but that would be the next step, which is something, I'd rather not do. But if you're on the line, you might expect to receive some letters with some language, so at some point. Yeah. But we really need to get those wells registered. And we want to do that, on the positive side. I think there's still an opportunity to exit this the probationary period before an interim plan is laid on Tri-County, and we want to avoid that. We do not want the state to have an interim plan. The flexibility, I know that some of the flexibility that we had hoped for may not be as flexible as we had the first 5 years, but there's still, in my opinion, will be more flexibility than if the state imposes something on the area. So that's the main concern, and I think starting with the registry of wells will go a long way with the state. You know, I believe that Pixley and Laura Tooley are going to get a nod from the state if we can get something in place with this new allocation program and management actions. Then, you know, maybe we can exit before you're paying, you know, large sums to the state. That would be what we're aiming for. And the quicker we can get there, the better that's going to be. But we also want to take the time to make sure everybody understands what we're trying to do.
Okay. You know what? I'm sorry, I won't be able to see if anyone has their hand up. So if you do have a question, just pipe up.
Yep, speak up.
Okay, so the native yield. The native yield value will be distributed to all acres. It is 0.22 acre feet per acre. That's the number we've talked about in our previous meetings. That is the value for the entire subbasin.
I'm going to complicate this a little bit. That's the value for the Tule subbasin.
Yes.
If you are a grower in Tulare Lake, that will be a different value, not determined yet. But it will be determined fairly quickly.
Yes, fairly quickly.
It's important to have when we present our new plan to the state for Tulare Lake, this will be included. I want to have our demand management program in place. I don't believe the state will consider it without that. So there's a time constraint on getting this completed for Tulare Lake.
So, you know, as I said, this native yield then is distributed to all acres. So everybody will have the 0.22, and you can certainly move that around in each of your personal accounts, or each account that you have on Basin Safe. How you opt to use that within your account is up to you.
Again, I'm going to caveat that with, if you have land in both the Tule and Tulare Lake, those will be separated,
yes.
and they won't be able to
yes.
move around.
Yes.
And I've been trying to think through, and this is a little in advance of what might happen, but I've been trying to think through what that's going to look like on Basin Safe. And likely, if you have lands in both Tule and Tulare Lake, you're going to end up with a separate Basin Safe account for each
yes.
of those. So that will be happening as well.
And then further to complicate, and this is why we don't have a draft of this, because, you know, as we're going through this, we're realizing there are properties that are on the boundary, and we're trying to figure out if it makes sense to, you know, lump those together or keep them, you know, continue to keep them separate within Tulare Lake, and so we're still having some of these discussions.
We're probably going to have to separate them.
Yeah, that's where we're leaning
And
towards.
if you're in Tulare Lake, you're probably going to be happy with that because you'll have more than the 0.22 likely in Tulare Lake.
But Deanne, we don't have there's no restriction on moving the native yield within if I wanted to buy it or get from another grower right now, right?
No, within the Tule
subbasin, the 0.22 is transferable. We don't have any transfer.
Within the Tule subbasin is
haircut. We don't have any haircut type things that we see like in Kuya. Okay. Because we are restricted in Kuya that you can only go so far with your sustainable yields and you start taking a haircut on it.
We haven't done that.
Okay.
In this policy that
That's good, because this is much lower. I would appreciate no haircut.
0.22.
Yeah, 0.22 is pretty low. So yeah, if you could transfer within the Tule to Tri-County, this southeast area, that would be helpful.
We're not going to be able to transfer the tiered water. The tiered water will stay with the account.
Right. But yeah.
That is a change from the current policy.
Yeah.
I'm probably spilling Amir's thunder.
No. This is all good. This is all good.
We discussed it the last one because I just had to the last stakeholder about some of the lands like the BLM lands and stuff. There was no discussion as far as what that might come into play if that's not all available. I mean, every land gets to 0.22, right? But there's obviously lands that will never pump or have very minimal pumping. And you guys were going to look at that? How was that discussion last month? What was the end
legally.
Okay.
So
So-
right now, every
So right now, we just
acre.
brought it, but it's gonna stay like it is.
Yeah, for right now.
Yeah, we are, just speak for a meeting we just had yesterday with BLM. We're looking at some management alternatives, and we want to include Tri-County in that management discussion.
Okay.
And so as people start talking about, oh gosh, we could start pumping water for all these wetlands out there, no, my feeling is no, we don't. We're gonna stick with the 630 acres that they have some pumping. I think it's 500 acre feet is all we're looking at.
Yeah.
So I think we have an MOU, I think, between BLM and Tri-County, so just have those discussions.
Okay.
That the water stays, it would be nice if the water stays in the ground.
Just looking at to keep as many acres as we can irrigated.
Yeah, we agree, Steve, we agree.
I don't wanna have 50,000 acres. Right?
Yeah, no, we agree.
Yeah. It's terrible.
So,
Yeah, I know, this is a tough conversation, so we agree. Okay, so native yield, everybody gets the 0.22. The transitional pumping, similar to what we have in the current policy, it only goes to acres that were in production in 2018. And obviously this applies for the new lands that are being brought in as well, or that have been brought in.
won't apply, but, yeah. I mean, it applies, they won't receive a transitional. Oh, you're talking about the West Management area?
Yeah, the West Management area.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Got me confused there for a minute,
What are you
yeah.
talking
The West
about?
Management area,
Okay,
I just want to make sure the West Management area folks understand that they will also be getting transitional pumping
yes.
if they were in production, if they qualify for being in production in 2018. That's all I was trying to do there.
Sorry.
Okay, so the use categories, these are the categories that we had previously. We wanted to talk about where and which ones still apply. What we're used to call sustainable yield, we're calling native yield to match the language that is in the new coordination agreement. Again, that's the 0.22. Precipitation credit, this is getting eliminated. The precipitation credit is already incorporated into the total volume of water that we're going to be allowed to pump. And that volume obviously is dropping. And that is based on the Appendix E of the groundwater model that we talked about last time. So the precipitation credits moving forward, that column will be going away. Landowner developed credits, that will obviously be maintained, and we'll probably try to figure out a way to make it a little bit more robust as well. So we are looking at some options there as to how to try to give you as much credit as we can for the landowner developed credits. We do have a recharge policy, so keep that in mind as we're talking about landowner developed credits. And if that recharge policy needs to be updated or modified, Tri-County is the board has the ability to do that. The Angela Water District groundwater credit, that now will become the return flow credit. And again, that value is built into the model, and there is a number for that directly for Angela.
Which is 6,000?
6,000, yeah, annually.
Yeah.
The tier 1 and the tier 2, those also will be maintained, and those use categories will also have values in them. And again, I'm going to encourage anyone who has a question to jump, to go ahead and jump in. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Okay, for I keep doing the 25. It should be the 26
Yes.
to 2030 landowner groundwater credits. And again, anywhere you see 25, please just mentally make it 26 to 2030. The cumulative allocation for that amount, or for those 5 years, is 7.72 acre feet per acre.
Hi, Amir, this is Steve Etchgary. Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Thank you for addressing the 2026 versus 2025. The question is, in the table in the water year, it says, for the example, the first line is 25/26. Will you guys be doing the allocations on a calendar year basis? So starting January 1st, 2026, you get the allocations in that first line, or is it on a water year basis? Does that make sense?
It's
Yeah.
been a calendar year, and
Calendar year, good.
it won't begin in January 1st, 2026.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And that's
We'll finish out. So, I mean, it probably makes sense to do it on a water year, where we do all of our annual reports on a water year, but we've been on a calendar year with allocation, and so
thank you.
I think it's probably
Yeah.
going to continue that.
And I mean, at least speaking for myself, I think from a landowner's perspective, that's easier and more straightforward if it's on a calendar year basis. So glad to hear you guys are doing it that way.
Yeah.
Thank you,
So
guys.
basically, when you look at this chart, the first one should be 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30.
Yeah. So it'll cover those 5 years, all of 30.
Yeah.
And then in 31, we'll have a new allocation.
Yes.
When I say that, I meant the transitional pumping will change.
Correct.
The native yield will stay the same.
5 years is a long time, Amir.
5 years is a long time.
I would never say something won't change. That's has not been my experience with Sigma, so you never know.
Okay, so these give you, the transitional pumping values are also listed there, so it gives you the total acre foot annually, and then it gives you the cumulative value of the 7.72. Again, all acres got native yield. The acreage that was in production and qualified for transitional. So if you currently have transitional, you will continue to get transitional. And obviously the west area management areas will be added to the transitional. And then you see the third or the fifth column is the Angela credit. So this is in line with what we talked about at our last meeting. Again, the reason that transitional pumping continues to drop is because we are essentially trying to get ourselves in line with the predicted values that the model has predicted for groundwater reductions. And I want to be clear that, look, we're going to have wet years in there. The model took that into account, and we basically still have to continue to reduce pumping, and in order to hit the value and those increases from recharge that occurs in those wet years is taken into account. And now, if we have a number of wet years and excessive years, we can revisit some of these issues.
We have Tri-County has the flood. We did all the flood credits here a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Right? And we classified those. Did we say those were upper, or did we distinguish those were given?
We did not distinguish those.
Okay, so going forward now with an upper and lower allocation, are we going to say, hey, those are all upper? So
You're talking about
Deer Creek, White River floods, we get 1,000 acres underwater.
Yeah, the landowner developed credits.
Yeah, what are we going to say?
Yeah, the recharge policy does address that, and it is in.
Well, no, we haven't revised it yet.
No,
we
I'm talking,
haven't
we're revising our pumping.
Yeah.
You're right.
Subsided.
We
Yeah.
So,
are.
I anticipate another flood year coming.
We're going
We're
to
gonna
have
a bunch
to
of ground inundated. And,
revise the recharge policy to correctly assess where that water is going in the ground at.
okay.
If it's recharged almost anywhere in Tri-County,
It's
it'll
to the
have to
upper?
be to the upper
Right.
aquifer.
Okay. That's what my assumption is. That's where we're going to
If
go.
we can find partnership in the east and recharge in the east, which would be fantastic, then I think we could possibly charge some of that to the lower aquifer, but without getting outside of the clay layer,
Yeah.
we know it's not getting there.
Or if you put in deep wells and do some kind of injection, ASR or something like that.
You think we get the exemption? That process, I mean, it's water quality issue.
It's a water quality
Yeah.
issue for an area that has lots of domestic wells.
Yeah, okay. But, yeah, I guess, so we'll go back,
Not
we'll
us.
clarify.
I was gonna say, we don't have lots of domestic.
Yeah,
With
just
that
clarify,
statement,
yeah.
it becomes a water quality issue for areas that have domestic wells. That's what I meant to say.
So we know.
Hey, Mayor.
Yeah,
Another question, Brandon Spain here. I
Sure.
guess with the current discussion on upper and lower aquifer, who is somebody working on studying exactly where those levels will be? What's considered upper aquifer and what's considered lower aquifer? Or are the landowners going to have to go through and assess their own wells?
no, if you are looking at some kind of recharge that potentially could go to the lower aquifer, the Tri-County would be more than happy to have that discussion individually and help you with that.
I think what Brendan's asking
What about-
is if they put their wells in the system, how do they determine if that well's actually in the upper or lower? What are those levels?
Who's
Yeah.
gonna look at the well logs and determine where the clay layer is?
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
That's
what-
what he's
yeah.
asking, yeah.
Yeah.
Who's gonna be the arbiter of the well logs? Who's gonna bless the well logs and say, hey, this is lower and this is
Are we gonna do that by zone as well? That's a good question. I mean, I don't know how that actually, it would be different.
big deal because we're looking at, when you're bifurcating your zone, a lot of us have deep wells. Before we go in and do some well retrofit, we need to know what level are we prohibited from pumping.
Mm.
Well, and to complicate it further, if it's split, if you have perforations above and below, what's the percentage of water from the upper or the lower?
Yeah, we figured that was coming up, and again, these are some issues that in fact, there's a list of issues you'll see in the last slide.
Brandon, have you talked to any well people? Because I've been talking to some getting ideas of what to do on a retrofit for that. Have you guys talked to anybody on that?
We have some thoughts, but how permanent do you want to go, I guess, is the major question, and it depends.
Yeah, okay.
Brandon, hold that thought for a second, because I made some notes myself, and you'll see that this is one of the issues that we're working through still, trying to nail down this as much as possible before we release the draft, and of course you'll have plenty of opportunity to comment on the draft as well. But we do recognize that that's an issue, and we're hoping to have at least our initial suggestion, recommendations back to you guys that you can still comment on and change, before we finalize the program. You guys all know this. I don't know why I keep saying that.
We're gonna have to do that by zone. I mean, mini zones would be the same, but because we'll have to determine where that low, or the lower aquifer begins.
Yeah.
Hey,
Different in the east than it is in the west.
Yes, for sure.
Denise, this is Steve Etchgary, or Deanna, I'm sorry. Question probably for both you, Deanna, and Amir. Is it possible to have like a self-certification basically by the growers, by the landowners? Just because I'm thinking from a GSA perspective, I don't know how it would be feasible to review, investigate, certify every single well, whether it's upper aquifer or lower aquifer. So can that just be part of the policy that it's self-certified essentially by landowners? It has to be stated upfront if it's upper or lower, but self-certified.
So Steve, what we could do is you register the well, give us the well log, you certify and you mark, we put a box or something for you to check upper or lower. I'm just, I'm just talking out loud here. And that way, and I'm going to get to this, is you pick where you want the allocation to take place. And then you can basically say, look, I have X lower wells, and I want all my allocation to be, the lower aquifer. And then we would put that into all of your account as a lower aquifer allocation.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I see you comment about self-certifying. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Amir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
give
agree.
us a well log and you guys self-certified. Let us think through that a little bit, but I like it.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just more feasible and practical for all parties involved.
Yeah, I agree. Because at the end of the day, it really matters is where your allocation occurs to, right? Which zone your allocation is being credited to.
Right.
All right. So now, penalties for pumping in excess of the native yield. So similar to our existing policy, this is very similar to what you're currently used to seeing. So that if you qualify,
Right, 125.
so it's 125. Okay. This is why we do draft.
Yeah, we're not raising it.
We're not raising it. It's
Bullet point 1, guys, should be 125, not 150.
Yeah, that's the current policy.
Correct.
So if you are pumping in excess of the native yield and up to the transitional allocation, it's 125. That's the tier 1, very similar to what we have right now. If you pump in excess of the transitional allocation, then you are subject to tier 2, which is $500 per acre foot, which again is what we have as a current policy. Okay, so that's above native plus your transitional allocation, and then beyond that. If you do not have transitional pumping, then any pumping above the native yield is subject directly to tier 2. So these are for any landowners that do not have transitional pumping. Okay, similar to what we have, not trying to keep that as the same as much as possible. Okay, now here's where things change a little bit. So landowners who incur a tier 2 overdraft will get a penalty towards their next year's allocation. So the allocation will be reduced by 1 times the allocation exceeded. Meaning if you exceed your allocation by 0.25 acre feet, a quarter of an acre foot a year, or in 1 year, we're going to reduce your next year's allocation by that amount.
Doing that, it shouldn't do that.
Uh-oh. Question? Or do we need to mute anyone?
I think we're good now.
Okay. All right. Okay. So that's new.
Amir, I just had a question though. You said there is a cumulative allocation of 7.72 for
Yes.
the first. Okay, so we are doing a cumulative.
No. If you exceed any 1 year,
Okay, 1 year.
your next year's allocation will be reduced.
So then what's the last?
If you exceed once you've hit the cumulative value,
7.72.
7.72, then you will trigger a cease pumping notice.
Okay.
I know this, so we're putting in a lot more teeth into this policy this time in terms of getting pumping under control. And we have to.
We have the annual transitional,
Yes.
and, business penalties on top of that, if it's just you, okay.
Yeah. And in addition to the penalties, the financial penalties, we're also now going to start limiting both on an annual basis and a cumulative total. So it's not, I mean, it's going to have some challenges moving forward. But these are the values that we're kind of working with, and we've got to get, as we're working down to reduce down to the sustainable yield, this is what we're going to have to do.
When you look at, the Schedule E, or the Appendix E of
Appendix E.
Tom Harders, in our first 5 years, we didn't meet what we were supposed to meet in reduction. So we're behind. But, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Nobody likes this, but we have to find a way to be sustainable 2040 and 2025. So
I understand where the Southeast is going, but how is this playing out? Because I don't want to pay penalties. I don't want to be, there's the public agency in the north part of the deal. I don't want to be hit adversely by anything they do. Right? I don't know where they're going to go.
they will be under this policy.
Right?
And all we can do is impose the same structure.
We shouldn't have, I don't think this should go back. Hope that in Southeast.
I hope not. I mean, I think it's important, that the Southeast area, I think there is a provision in SGMA that a managed area is a managed area, and there could always be an argument made that the Southeast area has adopted and is doing its part.
Right.
And so, if you have to cut the areas up and make that argument to the state, I think that's very possible.
Okay.
So let me talk a little bit about that second paragraph on the exceedances. This is the cumulative pumping value. And again, it's the cumulative amount. So in that 5 year, and again, it should be 26 to 2030, if you exceed that at any time in that 5 year period, you will get a cease pumping notice. That cease pumping notice will be in effect until 2031. In 2031, your 5 years will reset, and you will have a new allocation and a new transitional value. So cease pumping does not mean forever. It just means that you've exceeded the cumulative amount for that 5 year period.
But we're only giving allocations annually, though, right?
Yeah. But we are doing cumulative 5 years, and we're trying to give everybody as much flexibility in those 5 years as we can. We understand that things might, you might have a wetter, drier year in there.
7 feet, not a whole lot of water.
I know. I know, Steve, I know. But it does reset in 2031. It'll reset in 2036 as well. Okay. All right. So things that we're still ironing out and debating, and this gets back to Brandon's question as well. The upper and lower aquifer pumping limits. So right now, the model does not, our comfort level with the model and the fact that we don't have all the wells registered, we were going to initially basically say, look, when you guys come in, put in your wells and register your wells in the system, the allocation, you can select if you want the allocation to apply to the lower aquifer or to the upper aquifer, or to apportion the sustainable yield both. And then the same thing would apply for the transitional pumping. So if all your wells are completed in the lower aquifer, you would come in and say, look, I want the 0.22 sustainable yield all to apply to the lower aquifer. And all your transitional pumping would also then be automatically directed to the lower aquifer. If your wells if you have some upper and some lower, you can essentially say, look, we need, I'm going to make the number, 30% to the upper and 70% to the lower, and we'll divide things up that way as well. You won't get more than 0.22. You don't get 0.22 in the upper and 0.22 in the lower. You'll get 0.2 sustainable yield, period, and how you divide up that is up to you for all your acres. So that gets a little bit to what Brandon, you were talking about, and it gets a little bit to what Steve was talking about, the self-certification. So that's what we're currently thinking. We're trying to make sure that that makes sense all the way through per zone as well. So Deanna's not sure. Yeah. So again, these are all the items that we're trying to still work through. One of the questions that came up in our discussions is also about not allowing any new wells in the lower aquifer other than any replacement well. So if you have a well that you're using and have been using and it has an issue and you replace it and you're pumping the same amount of water, this would not apply. But what we don't want is new wells going into the lower aquifer. So we are talking about, at the GSA, should we be looking at a moratorium on new wells in the lower aquifer? We already know we have some subsidence issues, concerns. We already know we have, we're already reducing pumping, and we don't want to encourage people to put in new wells.
And Amir, sorry to interrupt. Quick question on that.
Sure.
What's the issue with if the amount of water is going to be limited, that's going to be pumped regardless? What's the issue with new wells? If you can touch on that just a bit.
Yeah. So this would be for the lower aquifer. We kind of feel like we've taken all this water and we've allocated it to the folks that were in production. And again, this is why this is still being, we're still debating to make sure this makes sense. What we don't want to do is have someone whose land is fallow start to accumulate a bunch of credit in the lower aquifer, and then all of a sudden, 5 years from now, sink a new well and say, I'm going to pump this water out. We would rather try to get the most efficient use of that water, which means that the guys who need the water today, as Steve said a second ago, 7 feet is not a lot in 5 years. I would rather have people with trading those credits now and those sustainable yield credits now and using that water rather than just allowing it to build up and having them sink a new well. Again, we're still debating whether that makes sense or is, what the ramifications of that might be, or even if it's necessary, quite frankly.
And we're going to work on an active trading market, a platform, because I don't want to be involved in facilitating trades, but I think we need a platform where that can happen more easily and encourage those landowners who do have stranded sustainable yield credits to engage in that platform. So I'm going to be working on that actively to have up and running before 2026.
Was that Steve that asked that question?
Yes.
So, Steve, did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did, and thank you for explaining. You did, and frankly, to be clear, your explanation makes sense, and I don't think anybody on this call or in that room wants that either, right?
Right.
So the rationale for your explanation makes sense. How the group gets there, obviously still TBD, but your rationale definitely makes sense to me.
Yeah. This is, Steve, it's one of those tricky things where you're trying to encourage behaviors without mandating them, right? And nobody wants that, but we're certainly trying to figure out ways to incentivize the most efficient use of the water. It would be a real shame if 5 years from now we had a whole bunch of sustainable yield that was just sitting on the books and could have been used by the land in production to keep it in production and active and everything else. And that scenario is what we're trying to avoid very much so.
So we're balancing that trying to find the additional credits with the management plan that would kick in if we have impact. So there's a balance there. Even if I could find all kinds of credits for landowners, if the MTs are triggered, then we end up in a management action plan anyway. So there's a balance there, and we want to keep as much land in production as possible. But it would be dishonest to say we're not going to take some out. I mean, probably 10,000 acres or so has got to come out. So
And
that's what we're looking at.
I would just make one request or maybe one point that if it could be kept in mind, if you guys on that point about no new wells in the lower aquifer, except when replacing an old well, like you said, Amir, I think that's appropriate. If that's the route that you guys go, if you could put language in or make that flexible enough where maybe the landowner is not necessarily obligated to, and I forget the exact correct terminology, but abandon the well per county specifications. And again, I don't know the exact terminology, but I know, or I believe that can be a quite expensive process, maybe to abandon wells and to do per county specification. So if there's a way to do it where if you're replacing an old well, drill a new one, but if that old well doesn't necessarily have to be quote unquote officially abandoned by per county specifications. Again, I don't know if I'm using the correct terminology. Hopefully that makes somewhat sense.
We were actually hoping, Steve, that you'll let us use any well that you're no longer using for water level measurements.
Yeah.
Add that to our water level program.
Yeah.
We actually, I'm being a little facetious, so please don't take this, literally, but we're actually hoping that we can get more, people don't abandon wells, and we actually get more monitoring locations.
Yep. That makes sense.
Okay. So, as I talked about, the discussion about the no new wells, I mentioned earlier that we're looking at the recharge credits and trying to figure out a way to make that program a lot more robust and try to figure out ways to get as much credit as we can, but also in the correct aquifer and making sure that the correct zone is being credited, but trying to expand that recharge credit program as much as we can as well, and try to come up with ways to encourage that and make it worthwhile, and cost effective for everybody. And then finally, as Deanna said, we also recognize that a trading platform is absolutely going to be necessary if we want to encourage the most efficient use of the water. We've got to make it easy for everyone to do that. And frankly, I think a lot of water may have been parked on the sidelines, if you will. It's just because we don't have a way of trading it, or people weren't even aware that they had this potential asset.
But that asset is not going away for them. What we did, the original sustainable yield allocation doesn't disappear.
Right.
It continues. So that asset's still out there, and we may have to build in where that sustainable yield does eventually fall off the books. I don't think we're quite there yet, but,
Because we don't,
the
there is no
platform,
expiration in wheel.
not at this time, there's not.
Right.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, we may eventually have to put some parameters about how much can be purchased in a particular area. We haven't done that yet.
Okay.
But, you know, with every action, there's a reaction in this Sigma world, so.
We're not gonna try to cover every
Right. And
scenario in the
And maybe
allocation
that's
policy.
covered with the management action plan, right? Then maybe we leave it open-ended, you can purchase and move credits around for sustainable yield, but if you're in that triggered management action plan, then, you know,
Yeah.
something happens with that.
Okay, so to kind of close up here, the management areas with impacts are going to be governed by the management plan. So all the numbers that we've talked about in this allocation policy will change for people that are in impacted management areas. It could be impacted for a variety of different reasons. It could be water levels are dropping. It could be a water quality issue, or it could be a subsidence issue. On water levels and water qualities, there are ways to get out. You know, the management plans will be written in a way that once those issues are addressed, we can take that management area out. But subsidence is not going to be that way. Once the subsidence starts to occur, it doesn't, you know, we're not going to see a substantial rebound in subsidence. You might see it either slowing down or maybe a small increase, but that'll be written, that portion of the management plan will be written a little bit differently. And that is, quite frankly, our biggest concern by far in the entire subbasin is subsidence. I don't think I'm talking out of turn when I say the number one reason that this subbasin is in probation is because of the subsidence issues.
Yeah, subsidence and dry domestic wells as well, but subsidence is really, it's the most difficult thing we face, and the state is very clear that subsidence has to end or be very near coming to an end. So it's hard. It's a hard issue.
Yeah. So, last reminder, register your wells. I cannot emphasize that to all of you. Register those wells. There's going, like I said, we're looking for incentives to build into the program for registering the wells. We're also looking for, you know, incentives when the trading programs kick into place as well. So registering your well is important. And frankly, because we are in probation now, everyone who's pumping more than 500 acre feet, the state requirements are also going to kick in for all of you on the registration for those wells through the state program. But we are working with the state to try and figure out how to coordinate and make it easy for all of you, so you don't have to, as much as we can, to try and reduce that work on your part. So if you register with us, we're hoping to be able to get it so that we can upload for only those of you that need to upload data to the state. We can do that for you, and that way we have the data and the state has the data, and there's not this silo of data. And we're trying to, again, make it as easy as we can for all of you. But there are, you know, this is the state of California we're working with, and they have some interesting ways of doing things.
Mayor, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, one last question to finish up. Just to be clear, the management plans that you guys are referring to, those have not been drafted or shared yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, they have not been shared yet. They're still very much in draft. We have an outline of the triggers. So, you know, what happens, I'm going to, bear with me, I think you can still see my screen. I'm going to go back a couple slides. You know, what happens is we hit each one of those 50%, 75%, 100% triggers. So we do have some outlines of that we're working through with Deanna and, you know, trying to make sure that it makes sense and it's workable and it's going to have the effect that we want it to have without unnecessarily punishing people who are playing by the rules.
We do intend, I'm reading through it now, we're working on some final things. We do intend to have it out in the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks.
2 weeks for the management plans, yeah.
Maybe 2 weeks, and then we will work through concerns and questions and ideas at the next meeting, which is on here, but we need to move it because the next advisory committee meeting is the day before Thanksgiving, and I doubt I'll have very good attendance on that day. So
I won't be here.
We could move it to the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, the 26th, or we can move it up 1 week if the week of Thanksgiving is not good for everybody. 26 gives us more time, but other than that, Tuesday the 19th also works, and I'm open to suggestions. I haven't asked Amir about those dates, but
I can make the 19th.
Okay.
Yeah, either day I can make it, either 19th or 20th. So, yeah.
Would you prefer the 19th and not?
I
Yeah.
would. Yeah.
Okay, then let's just make it the 19th and
Yeah.
Tuesday the 19th at 10 a.m.
I think it's pretty safe to say most of you would probably agree. Let's not do it the week of Thanksgiving.
Come on.
I think we all have.
I'm here anyways, so it doesn't matter.
I think we all have some plans.
Sure.
I was going to say something about the management plan. I know what I was going to say. In here, in the allocation program, you will see that once you exceed the 5-year cumulative pumping amount, which is the 7.72 value that we talked about for the next 5 years, we have a cease pumping requirement. You will also see in the management actions and those management plans that if you hit 100% of the MT, right now we are thinking that that's also going to trigger a cease pumping. And this is where I was talking about the two documents working together. They're
cease pumping from the lower, from the.
cease pumping from whichever aquifer is hitting the MT.
That's why we have to go back to the investigation portion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that a landowner be very clear about where we're headed before we get to 100%.
Right.
This is the problem we see in the zone. You know, this is what we suggest as the step, but when you hit this is what's going to happen.
Right.
And we'll have to tailor it. I don't have so many landowners that we can't take a good look in the zone and tailor it, but we'll have to. I mean, we're going to try to make it as clear as we can in the policy. We will also want to be nimble.
Yeah.
In what we do and make something.
So for instance, the side is MT, if you hit in your zone, you hit the MT, you still have access to the upper aquifer.
Yes, that's correct.
Correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
We're not talking 100, I just want to make sure that we're clear that we're not talking about 100%.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's all pumping.
That's clear. Yeah, yeah. The document very clearly says that.
Illegal either, so.
Yeah. Yeah. The document clearly says that in our current draft.
Yeah. I think that would be, first step, certainly.
Yeah.
All right.
If impacts are occurring, we will be notifying people multiple times before we get to the 100% of the MT. And especially water quality would likely only affect a limited number of wells. So there's, we're trying to figure out ways to say all of that in a way in the plans that make sense, that are actually manageable too. All right, that's what I have for today. I know that was a lot. I know many of you are probably wondering, our plan is to release a written allocation program with all the details and everything that we talked about as a draft, of course, within the next week, or two at the latest. And then that would be open for your comments. And then, hopefully within the next 2 weeks, we also will have a initial draft of the, management plans for your input. Now I realize these two things might happen at separate times, but we are looking at them as related documents, but they are standalone documents. Both will end up in the GSP that we submit to the state. The state very, very, very much is expecting to see these management plans. That is, they want to see both, but we already have an allocation program, but they would very much like to see the management plans of what happens if impacts are occurring. That's probably the one way to get out of probation. It's a big step towards getting out of probation. All right. So the reason I was saying all that, of course, is that don't feel like you need to review what I just presented. It will all be laid out very nicely in a written document within the next week or two at the latest. Okay, and you'll have plenty of time to comment on it. We talked about our next meeting, and then the last thing is that the board meeting on November 7th.
Yeah. 1 o'clock, November 7th.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions from anyone? Stop sharing button. Oh, it didn't.
Creeps today.
Oh well.
Oh well.
I've got a question. In regard to, this is Wendell Nicholas, in regard to the almost artificially low MTs in the border area around White River, there was talk of raising those. Nothing has been said relative to that. Would that be taken care of in the subsidence study that follows and would be finalized after, around the second quarter next year? Or how is that being handled?
Yeah, if it's within that study zone area, it will be included in that study, and the MTs that come out of that, will be what they are.
Yeah. All right.
So to follow up on Window, so what are we gonna start with on those? Is this the draft that you guys, are we gonna adopt? Is that what this is for, or what is the plan? These numbers?
Those numbers. That study zone, even if we adopted that, the study zone would be different. And frankly, I am working with Tom Harder on the whole southeast area to look at revising those MTs for subsidence.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we may adopt something with MTs that could change, or I'm not sure how we'll handle that yet. But I have indicated to, and Amira has indicated to the sub-basin, we put it on the facilitator's desk and everything, saying that we are looking at that southeast area. We might want consideration there. Frankly, we haven't had the meeting with all the consultants yet to discuss that. I have discussed it with Eric Lemus. He is not opposed to looking at those MTs in the southeast area. I think that probably I need to put a meeting together with Alpa to talk about it, because the Delana Early Mart situation is what it is. The other GSA that wanted MTs higher was Alpa. So if they would like to work with us to raise them a little bit now, I would think we would have the same desires as Tri-County, but I haven't heard that from them. And if not, we would have to feather something out. So on the Kern border as well, Kern has 4 feet, so you have to find a way to coordinate that a little bit, which means, you know, you kind of go from that and move out. But I would caution that even with consideration of this, more than a foot in any area would not happen. So at most, we may get a foot or a half a foot increase in the MT, but it's not going to be usually substantial. But even a foot or a half a foot is better than what those values are now.
Yeah, there's three, I think 4 zones on the east side of our Wright County area. The lowest in the whole area.
Yes.
Of every zone. Right.
Yes.
And
It's kind of seems awkward
It does.
when we're Philly River up there is flooding and they give them 8 feet, 7, 8 feet up there, and we're like, okay, we're at 2 down here. Where are we actually impacting?
Yeah, I don't.
Most of the Delano pipeline, but other than that, what are we actually?
right.
I don't disagree.
Nothing.
No, we're on the same page.
Yeah. So you guys gotta go to bat for us on that, across the whole southeast area. Really.
Yeah, and we are. It's already out there for consideration. We just have to get the talks scheduled, basically.
And Tom did send a preliminary, he did send a note out on what day he's expecting, or he's trying to set up the meeting.
Good.
Wendell, I'm sorry, I think you started to say something, we spoke over.
No. I was just saying that, do we have the data that DEID used to claim that their system, their irrigation system was going to potentially be impacted? And secondly, do we have information on wells maybe that were established? This is supposition, but wells that might have been established subsequent to the their claim of risk on on their irrigation system, that would seem to imply that the risk of they share the risk with anybody else in the neighborhood of, I'm not saying share in regard to mitigation, but I'm saying share the risk. We're not solely responsible. I mean, it's to me pretty much of a reach. And so that'll all be, I guess, addressed in this subsequent study, and be good for us, the people in the Southwest area, to be perfectly clear as to what the issues are and what the remedies are and what the what's fair. You need to have one small area be in effect a scapegoat for a coordination agreement.
No, that's exactly right, Wendell, and that is exactly what we are going to ask for in the study. Is that there's has to be clarity on both sides of the line, both on the Delano Early March side and on the Tri-County side, as well as the Pixley side, as to well density, well depth, possibly date of drilling. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to ask for, but it's not going to be a one-sided study. I've already said I won't accept that, and frankly, I was pleased that Eric Lima said he would not accept that either. So we're very keen that the study has to give us a result that we can rely upon.
Great.
Yeah, we don't want the study to reinforce a preconceived belief. We want it to actually be based in the reality of what's actually occurring and why.
Right.
And why are those impacts? If there are impacts, why are they actually occurring?
Right.
including the age of the pipeline, which is quite aged.
Yeah.
You know, 70-year-old pipeline system.
Okay, that's what we had for today. So just a quick reminder, next meeting will be at Tuesday, November 19th at 10
10 a.m.
All right. If there aren't any other questions from anyone, thank you all very much, and expect some draft documents from us in the next couple weeks. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.